know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420 WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. A little bit of a late start here due to some technical issues in the studio. You know, the studio is fine. It's the things that we use here for the myriad of other media that we bring in with us. So it was the podcasting recorder was the issue. But you got it all set, right, Matt? All right, yeah, because nodding works on the radio. He says that we should be good to go. I know his microphone's like 10 feet away. We should be good to go, so this show will be podcast. So those of you who are listening live, you can just go to bed. We'll talk to you next time. No, you don't want to do that. We're also broadcasting on Spooky TV. If you go to SpookySouthCoast.com and click on the Spooky TV icon, you can see us here in the studio, and you'll see that we have a guest with us in the studio tonight. We have Bill Gauthier. He is a do you refer to yourself as a horror writer specifically, or do you just say author?
I usually just say writer.
Writer?
Yeah. Other people will call me horror writer. That's fine because there are a long line of people who've done a lot of good writing in horror. But I tend to prefer horror because writer because it sounds a little bit nicer when you're talking to people. Mm-hmm. You say the word horror, they expect automatically, for you to, want to eat babies or run over old ladies.
Don't knock it though. That. I mean, with the right
a little
marinade,
bit of lemon sauce and a nice crisp crust, they're fine. But you keep that stuff at home. It's not exactly allowed out in public.
It's always hard to find a good wine to go with them too.
Well, watch out. This is the guy that's famous for his meat barbecues in the summertime. So
we'll have to get together.
Yeah, we can't be sure if he's kidding or not. But no, I mean, let's talk tonight about the idea of horror writing, and because we are obviously fans of the genre, doing what we do, and
absolutely
living the kind of lifestyle that we do. But it's something that we really haven't gotten into the meat and potatoes of. We're going to bring on another writer with us too. We're going to bring in Chris Balzano, the fourth man here on the Spooky South Coast Spooky Crew. I'll get that, Matt. That's all right. Want to hit the air button? All right, there you go. Sorry. I always wait till he's in the middle of doing something else, Chris, when I ask him to bring somebody on or do something else.
The fourth man, but yeah, first in your heart, right?
Absolutely. He's number 37 on the bestseller list, but he's number 1 in our hearts.
Yeah, I wish.
Well, Chris, thank you for helping us put together this show last minute because our regular guests, Kristen and Manny from Bridgewater Triangle Research, they couldn't be with us. We are going to reschedule with them. It was an unforeseen emergency that popped up. So we'll have them with us hopefully in the next coming weeks. But for now, I mean, I know that we've been talking about having Bill on for quite some time now.
Yeah, when he first emailed us and sent the books out, I read it and I was highly impressed, and I've talked about it in the chat room a little bit and online, and then we had the days just kept like filling up with guests, and we kept pushing it back, and so when we had an opening tonight, he was the first person I thought of. So.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I think I first got in touch with you a few years ago when I was trying to put together the horror writer roundtable that we had plans of having.
Yeah, about 5 years ago. That's how I learned that there was such a thing as Spooky South Coast, because I generally don't pay attention to much of anything, and except for stuff that's not. How to put nicely, WBSM. Anyway, that sort of stuff, AM radio. And I think I'd heard a little bit of something about it, but I don't tend to follow a lot of paranormal sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't really believe in the paranormal and whatnot, so I had never listened to it. So when you sent me the email and asked, would you and Greg F. Giffune, who actually helped my career, helped discover me about 10 years ago, as crazy as that sounds to me now, I said, oh, well, yeah, cool. All of a sudden, I'll start listening. And I know I'm just breaking all kinds of rules and probably it just ruined any chance of being invited back. But truth will set us free, I guess.
Well,
and
that was our theory. We figured that if we just pretended like we were going to have you on, we could get you to listen.
there you go.
I actually sent that email to everybody in the world.
Well, thank you. That just what do you know? I got something to do, Bridgewater or something.
I just said, hey, whatever it is that you do, we want to feature you on the show. No, but I mean, we really did want to have that show, and that's at a time when we were not really, we didn't know what the limitations were going to be of doing this show. We just assumed, okay, there's 4 or 5 microphones, we can bring in 10 people and have no problem. And it was just logistically, we could never find a way to do it. So we'd actually talked about bringing it outside the studio and doing it somewhere else, like at a conference table with a bunch of microphones set up, and it just became more of a laborious thing that we never actually got into doing.
I was always glad that it never actually came to fruition, only because at the time that you contacted me, I had all of one short story that had really done anything at all, and a column that maybe 3 people read, not even people I know. So it was one of those things where, as exciting as it sounded at the time, I was really terrified about the idea, because I would have felt like a poser, as of now where I have 3 small press published books that, only 5 people have read, one of them I know. I feel much more accomplished and ready for unveiling.
Well, in this area here, and for those who are unfamiliar where Southcoast is, it's the South Coast of Massachusetts.
The armpit of Massachusetts.
That's exactly it. Well,
and I love it. I love it here, I have to say. But
we're Wareham guys, as is Greg. So we literally live in the armpit itself. But is there a really good horror writer community
I have
in this
no
area?
idea. Nobody's ever contacted me. I know that there's actually an organization now called the New England Horror Writers Association that I stumbled across or saw on Facebook. There's a woman named, I believe, Tracy Carboni, who is one of the people who run it, and it's a free organization that people have joined. I joined because I saw that they had newsletters and would help promote the books. Mm-hmm. And cool people like the writer Christopher Golden, who is a fabulous writer and actually has been around for a long time, has written Buffy the Vampire Slayer books and Hellboy novels and things like that. I knew that he was a part of it, and a lot of other names I recognized, so I said, oh, well, that will be cool. I've never gone around. I've never met any of them, but I'm also very, very shy and sort of get anxious. I went to a convention of horror writers that's actually held every year in Bristol, Rhode Island. Wanted to go for years and years and years. Paid the fee for just showing up instead of staying overnight. Got there, was there for about 4 hours, had a small panic attack in a bathroom and left. So it was one of those things where I don't get out quite much, but my wife is listening to this and going, I can't believe you just said that.
Well, I mean, part of the deal with it too is, like, you read some of the stories of some of these writers, and you start to wonder about what they might be like as people when you're reading the horrific stuff that they're writing. I mean, it's great writing and it grips you so much, but it kind of scares you a little bit, and you say, gee, I wonder what goes through their minds. But then I'm sure when you do meet them, they're the nicest people in the world.
From the few people I met Christopher Golden. I actually did a signing with him up in Boston at this great science fiction horror bookstore called Pandemonium Books. He was the most pleasant person I've ever met. I have heard that the King, Stephen King, is a quite pleasant person. As a matter of fact, my wife has met him when she lived in Boston when I met her and worked at an art gallery. And she met him and his wife on several occasions. They would come in and buy some, I think she had said some weird sort of dog paintings or something that she would never have imagined that Stephen King would want to buy, but she said he was one of the nicest people. From what I could tell from that Nikon thing, though, I did not talk to anybody. Everybody was quite friendly. I just was sitting in the back, taking in the talks and stuff, and I think that had there not been a 3-hour delay between the last talk and the actual social gathering, I probably would have ended up by being in the mix and everything else. So and Greg Gauthier, who I've never actually spoken to but have had an email correspondence with, and is really actually one of the reasons why I have one of the novellas out right now. He's been nothing but nice. So from all intents and purposes, with the exception of a few, I guess, people on the fringes, most of us tend to lead normal, somewhat normal, healthy, friendly lives.
They get out the dark side of their personality in their writing.
Absolutely. I mean, why go out and trying to get that bus full of nuns off the bridge when you can do it just as easily in a book and nobody gets hurt and they'll give you money for it. So
there you go.
You know.
And Chris, I noticed while you were in the chat room there, I don't want to give away your secret name, but while you were in the chat room, I noticed that you were contesting the idea that there was a writer involved with Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, I don't want to go there. I still like to think that the entire thing just someone was going to walk around with a video camera. Buffy's a real person. No such person as Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
So let's just leave it at that, brother.
Chris and I were having I'm gonna tell this story on the air now. Chris and I were having a conversation earlier this evening, and I mentioned Freddie Prinze Jr. and he's like, "Who?" I said, Mr. Buffy, and he's like, "No." I was not allowed to say that.
My life is too real. I have to have a few fantasies. All right, kid.
All right, I'll leave you to that one. But I mean, Chris, you were up when you did live up here. I mean, you were involved with a lot of local writers and local authors and everything, but more on the nonfiction side. It seems like though that there's a very burgeoning community in the fiction side. Did any of them ever reach out to you to kind of tap into some of your research?
Originally, and I'm actually thinking about contacting me because I just heard he's had a novel published. An old friend of mine from college, and we had a really great idea of writing a dual book, which would be a nonfiction book about paranormal cases, and then giving those paranormal cases to the hands of different fiction writers and allowing them to then write a fiction story. And so it's almost like a fact or fiction kind of book. And we were really enthusiastic about it. It kind of ended up falling through, and we weren't able to follow up on it. Some people said, you're blurring the line a little bit. And I'm like, well, maybe that's what the paranormal needs sometimes. It needs to have that blurred because, when we start getting back to the stories that sparked our interest in this thing in the first place, maybe then we can start getting some more, genuine explorations of it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something interesting, Bill. You said that you're not really a believer in the paranormal.
Yeah. I don't believe really in the... I shouldn't say really. I don't believe in the paranormal. I'm a card-carrying atheist. I'm everything that people run and cringe from as far as those sorts of beliefs. I tend not to, talk about them, especially in this area. They're not popular beliefs necessarily, but I'm not. However, they're fascinating. It's fascinating that people would necessarily, to me, have that sort of faith in something or need that faith in something. It's great. I wish I had that. It would probably calm down some of those anxieties that I was talking about. But what's interesting with what Chris said, and not to keep bringing up the novella because I don't want to be one of those people like you.
You're talking about Shadowed.
Shows, but Shadowed, the one in general, that one. Available in ebook anytime now, and also limited signed numbered edition through Delirium. DeliriumBooks.com, something, I don't know, whatever. But
all your relevant sites are linked up to our site too, SpookySouthcoast.com, right on the front page.
Cool. That one actually, that story came to me not just out of the blue. I actually, back in 2003, had decided that I wanted to try to really jumpstart my writing career. My short story that I had mentioned before, which is called The Growth of Alan Ashley, had just sold to a really cool, prestigious anthology called Borderlands 5, and edited by Elizabeth E. and Thomas F. Montioloni. And Tom Montioloni has been a writer since, I don't know, early 70s or something. And I had grown up reading the Borderlands books, and they had finally opened up. It was, I think, 7-10 years, something like that, between book 4 and book 5. They opened up they opened up for submissions, and I had decided that I was going to send them a story. The Growth of Alan Ashley was accepted. I never thought it would be. It was in the book with Stephen King. I was thrilled. Well, I decided that I wanted to try to do something a little bit different and try doing a short story a day, which up until that point was something I had never tried and have never tried since. And so I had emailed a couple of friends asking for, ideas, stories. I have some friends who are artists, and saying, throw me anything that you have. Doesn't matter what it is. I will write a story about it. I want to do 7 stories in 7 days. And the very first story came from a friend who sent me a link to this website. I clicked on the link. It went to this website that had a photograph of a teenage girl's bedroom with this shadow person in it. and it had the story about how the shadow person was haunting her and, you know, touched her and things like that. And I said, I'm not writing this story. I'm trying to break out of just doing horror. I'm going to, whatever, no, forget it, delete, whatever. And then I'm sitting there that morning, that Sunday morning. I decided it was going to start on a Sunday and end on the Saturday, and I'm sitting there and thinking, the voice that I think everyone has, but the voice that I know that I have, not this David Berkowitz kind of voice. But
it's not coming from the dog?
No, it's not coming from, I don't have a dog. But the voice says, you want to write this? And I said, okay, what is going to happen? At the time, I had just popped in, because I'm a really, really cool person, the Sarah McLachlan CD, and the song Possession came on, and the first lines of the song, and then leading into the chorus, something, I want to hold you down and kiss you, something, can't breathe, I don't know. I said, that's the story. That's the story. And so I went back, and I think the first lines of the song were, listen as the wind blows across the great divide, voices trapped in yearning, memories trapped in time, voices trapped in yearning became shadows trapped in yearning, and that was the short story that I wrote. All these years later, Greg Gauthier was the one who kind of, I tried it as a novel as well, and when Greg Gauthier had emailed me asking me if I had anything for this Delirium novella line, I said, I have a 50,000 word abandoned novel I can cut down in half, and that's how that came out. But yeah, what Chris was saying, came from this thing that I totally think is total and complete BS, but yet the story just captured me. The idea of it captured me. The idea that there's this shadow thing that maybe you can't see face on and stuff. And I don't know if that was part of the story. I think that was something that I had been carrying in my head, something just off the peripheral vision. Every time you turn, it's not there.
Do you feel...
Well, it was interesting you said you didn't have an interest in the paranormal, because having read Alice on the Shelf, to me it seemed to strike upon a lot of the things we talked about on the show. You know, maybe not local hauntings or what is this ghost group doing, but a lot of the things having to do with, you know, why do we touch upon these ideas or these themes that are constantly kind of rolling around in our popular culture and our literature? Why do we keep fixating on them and then kind of transfer those over to these hauntings, as whether it might be, you know, the reason for a haunting or what sparks people to get an interest in this? And so, you know, I think that's, you know, Alice on the Shelf is a perfect Spooky South Coast kind of book club book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Excuse me. That's something that's always sort of fascinating, because when I was a kid, when I was right up until around, I'm going to say 11 or 12, my belief systems were just the opposite of what it is. I believed everything. I mean, you know, I went to bed, put the covers on real tight because I didn't want the thing under the bed to reach up and touch me. I remember I had an Incredible Hulk poster, the Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk, and he was posed, and my mom had bought it for me because I was a fan, you know. And I hated the poster because at night when the lights went off, he'd start flexing those muscles and doing the Hulk thing. And I was convinced he was going to jump off. And this is, yeah, that's the younger kid stuff. But right up, I remember being, you know, 12, 13, right after my Pepe died when I was 11. I remember thinking, you know, he's probably watching me right now and that sort of thing. And it freaking me out, especially when you get to 12 or 13 and the changes start happening and you start finding yourself alone in a bathroom and stuff.
It never stops. I can tell you the first horror story that I read that really got to me, I was probably about 7, first or second grade. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I got out of the Turner Library in Randolph, and it's a collection of like ghost stories for kids.
Yeah. And
one of the stories was about a boy whose father was a sailor and he drowned at sea, and he had this picture of him hanging up in his room, and you know, when he would go to sleep at night, he would see like his father drowning in the picture. His hair would be all wet, and and like that really that really got to me, but that started, you know, my love affair of reading these stories. And I never thought that I would have, when I later became a writer, I never thought I'd be able to tell the story in a way that scares people. I mean, how do you know when you're telling something that there is that element to it that it's going to be gripping enough in that manner?
I have no bloody idea.
Really?
I go blind. I think for me, one of the things that helped me was the fact that I was so young when I started writing. I was 13 when I started to write stories, and I've been telling stories my entire life. I was actually afraid of almost everything. I remember we were so excited to get cable when I was 6 years old so that we could finally watch Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yeah.
And, you'd waited to hear it all about it, and
You're
it came...
dating yourself.
I know.
That's fine.
Well,
It sounds like we're about the same age.
as
That's fine.
I don't mind. I'm 33. It's still relatively young,
Yep.
science-wise.
Moniz was already, 40 years old by the time that video came.
Uh-oh. Well, yeah, we were so excited about watching Michael Jackson's Thriller that it came on, and I couldn't wait. And I sat down in front of the TV, and it starts, and they're doing this, and then he bends over and lifts up the yellow eyes, and I screamed and ran out of the room. So that was my first real exposure to horror, and I stayed away. And then around 8 or 9 years old, I started suffering from insomnia, and I would get up and sneak out of the bedroom, and we lived in a very small apartment at the time, and my sister was sleeping in the bunk bed up above me or below me, I don't remember, and I would come down, I'd sneak out, shut the door, and I'd turn on HBO, and the parents would be sleeping, and the volume would go down, and I'd get a whole new education through HBO, and one of the things that would be on often would be horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I would steer clear from them for the longest time, and then one night I saw this movie that I kept seeing commercials on, some movie called The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, and the only thing I remember from the commercials was the Freddy jumping out of the I guess French glass doors and disappearing, and I thought that looked like the coolest thing. And just around that time, my parents had a night free of the kids. We went to Grandma's house, and they went out and did whatever parents do when kids aren't around. And apparently one of the things they did was watch Nightmare on Elm Street. My mother let me watch that. I had told her right around that time, I can watch your thrillers with you now on Dialing for Dollars or whatever it was that they would come on. She said, look, I watched this movie. It was called A Nightmare on Elm Street. There was 2 of them. Dating myself again, there was only 2 at that time. And she said, I'll let you watch it. And I'm 9 years old. And she said, I'll let you watch it, but know this. It's scary. The first one's scary, the second one sucks. The first one, that's what she said. The first one's scary, and I'm not going to let you come into the bed if you have nightmares. So I'm going to let you make this grown-up decision on your own. And I think a part of her was saying, if he watches this and never watches another horror movie, and, he's better for it. If he watches it and likes it, well, I've given him this thing. He's old enough to make that decision one way or the other. And I watched it, and I loved it. It was crack to me. It was just... I became obsessed with Freddy Krueger. I also had nightmares beyond belief, and to this day, every year I'll have one Freddy Krueger nightmare a year. And the old Freddy, not the new meatball-headed Freddy from this past year, that my wife graciously went to see with me at the North Dartmouth Mall at 10:30 on a Sunday morning. And I felt that I needed to put that on the air because I want everyone to know how much of a saint she is.
That's the perfect time, but... It's amazing how similar it sounds like our childhoods were. The same thing with me. I couldn't sleep. I used to sneak downstairs, turn on the TV, and I would watch. They ran the old black and white Universal movies. Like I think I saw House of Dracula, and with the Count Alucard. I remember watching those movies, and then Dialing for Dollars, seeing The Howling and the original Halloween and all these movies. And it was the same thing.
Creature double feature on Channel 56.
Absolutely.
That's how I saw The Howling. Slept through it the first time, got to see it the second time.
My parents told me the same thing. You can watch it, but you reap what you sow. And
I've talked about that before. We really are. I mean, our generation, not Moniz's generation before they had TV.
They had TV. It was just an experimental medium then.
But our generation really seems like the first that were really raised on these very moving from the black and white to the really graphic horror movies, going to the drive-in and seeing things like The Exorcist and even something as bizarre as Close Encounters that a 7-year-old can't process the right way. It seems like we're the first generation whose parents like not only let us watch those things, but kind of fed us, and then throw in Creature Double Feature and the Movie Loft, which didn't edit anything, and it's no wonder we're all messed up.
Well, I mean, look at. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great example. At 6, 7 years old, I'm watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, loving the adventures of Han Solo in a funky hat, and all of a sudden at the end, people are melting, and it's PG.
Yeah.
You know, everything is fine. I mean, I think the first time I saw that, I was horrified, but at the same time, you knew this wasn't a scary movie, and so there was that definite, you know. The Goonies was another one that was quite like that had a lot of real adult. So, I mean, Spielberg and Lucas back in the 80s, and more Spielberg than Lucas. His horror movies came later. Had this fine line of what's appropriate for kids and what's not appropriate for kids. Because it had the Spielberg name on it, they would allow it out, you know, with the PG. Or, I mean, if it wasn't for him and Indiana Jones almost getting an R rating, there'd be no PG-13 rating, that sort of thing. And I think that there was as forward as we are now in the 21st century, where you can watch an R-rated movie on HBO at 2 in the afternoon, or you can listen to satellite radio, which is completely uncensored, or the internet, which you can get anything you want at any time. I almost feel like we've sort of gone back to almost, in some ways, 1950s sensibilities on certain things. We can watch the Jersey Shore on MTV, but if there's a silly wardrobe malfunction or somebody accidentally cusses, you know, there's protests outside, and, you know, they're getting lambasted. It's a very odd thing. I think the 80s were freer like that in some ways.
Well, and I think too, like when depending on what era you grow up in, your horror is different.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, we came of age ourselves in kind of the slasher, campy horror days. When it was Freddy, when it was Jason, when it was Wes Craven's Shocker, when it was... What was that other one that was Deadly Friend with the robot? You know, like,
I forgot about that one.
The Gate, you know, movies like this. Eventually, you know, you get into like the Child's Play and Scream is being mentioned in the chat room here, where it's like, you know, our horror was based in humor.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of, and as we got older, then our parents would say, okay, now you can watch The Exorcist.
You know, I mean, when you look at the originals, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, there's no real humor in it.
No.
Freddy's enjoying himself, and that's the magic that Robert Englund brought to the role and that's one of the things I think that detracted from, for me, the experience, because I was really excited. I knew it was going to be bad, but I was really, really excited for the new remake, was that what made the character Freddy special, especially in that first one, was he was terrifying, but he was having fun at what he was doing. When you saw Michael Myers that first time, there wasn't really any winking at it. It wasn't really until the sequel started coming out, and then Kevin Williamson did the script for Scream, and Wes Craven went back. And at that point, I don't even consider that a movie of my childhood, because I was, I think, 18 when it came out. So at that point, yes, I was still a kid, but I was a kid with, you know, much better knowledge of the world than I was 9 years before, when my mom let me stay up and watch that double feature.
Well, what's strange about it too is that you know, it wasn't that Freddy was and we did a whole show on Freddy, Chris, but it wasn't that he was so much scary.
I'm gonna have to download that podcast.
As he was an anti-hero.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
And it kind of made him, even though they say later, you know, when he started making the one-liners and all that stuff in the later films, it doesn't matter. Right out of the gate, he was worshipped because he was not what you expected.
He was the last remnant of punk rock.
Yeah,
I mean, really, I mean
that
was what he was. He was rock and roll, and that was, I think, probably the attraction for. I mean, a 9-year-old, I'd get this glove. I had pens on the end of it. I'd have the sweater that I had, and grab one of my dad's fedoras, and I'm running around the neighborhood. And the neighbors used to see me running around the neighborhood only usually as a Jedi Knight or as a superhero. We're going, what is this? And I'm telling them, oh, I'm Freddy Krueger. Well, who's he? Well, he's a former child killer who's all burnt up by parents. Okay, it's time to put the kids away, and Mrs. Gauthier.
You don't play with the Gauthier kid anymore.
Yeah, Mrs. Well, that was already there, but there were other stories. We'll leave those out for another time, perhaps. But yeah, you know, that sort of thing. It was really a transitive moment in my life, which led me directly to eventually buying a Stephen King novel, that changed everything. So Freddy, it was funny. Star Wars led me, believe it or not, to Freddy because the love of imagination, the love of creating, the love of play, those
You
actions.
fell to the dark side.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
and I think Stephen King is the way that a lot of us in our generation didn't not only got into horror but got into reading.
Got into reading, absolutely.
I remember Stephen King books being some of the first books that I read that weren't assigned school reading.
Exactly.
And I would see the covers of them in the store and say, "Wow, I really want to read that." And eventually, like one of my grandparents would buy it, or my aunt would buy it, and they'd have it left over and say, "You done with that? Can I borrow that?" And they say, "I don't know if you can read that." I remember checking out Tommyknockers from the Sandwich Public Library when I was in the 6th grade, and the librarian telling me, "Oh, you can't read that. That's way too adult for you."
That happened to me actually. It was funny because I was already into horror movies, and this was the great time to be into the horror movies because there wasn't all these cable channels where you could have everything's on Sci-Fi Channel.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be flipping through the channels on a Sunday afternoon, and some UHF station or whatever syndicated station had Stephen King's World of Horror, which was this 1 hour sort of thing. Not even hosted by King. He must have just... It had some interview snippets with it. I actually found a VHS copy on eBay about 10 years ago and bought it. And it's cheesy, but what they did was they showed a lot of behind the scenes and special effects makeup for these horror movies, and Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was one of them and everything else. And I had known his name through that first. I remember in 6th grade we had a teacher... Mr. Sylvia at the Charles S. Ashley School. He's no longer at that school. Somewhere, he's in this area somewhere. And he was a big reader. And at the time, I would read maybe the Choose Your Own Adventure stories sometimes. And usually, my character died within 3 pages. So I didn't even do the... If it wasn't a movie, I wasn't interested. And I remember one of the boys in the class got from the bookmobile of all places Pet Sematary, which I had seen as the movie. And I remember him reading the hardcover, and it kind of stuck in my head. And then about a year later, when I was in 7th grade, my sister was down at St. Joseph's Church in New Bedford. We lived in the North End at communion recital, and I said, I'm not going to stay here, whatever. I'm going to go down. I'd had bad experiences. I'm going to go down, and got jumped in the hallway in catechism when I was like 9 years old or something. So that was the last time I went there. Went down. I said, I'm going to go to the library. So I went over to the library at Brookline Park, the Wilkes Library, and I went through and I found the paperback copy of Pet Sematary. And I said, oh, well, that kid, he read it, and that, I like the movie. Let me take it out and try it. And I brought it up. Now, about 6 months prior, I had taken out another adult book called Murder in the National Cathedral or something by Margaret Truman. I got about 50 pages into it, and the only pleasure I got out of the whole book was that at one point on one page, one of the characters said the alternate word for poop that I guess I'm not going to say because of the FCC. I don't want you guys to get fined.
They're asleep.
Okay. Well, then, in that case... and so here I was. I said, this stunk, and that had pushed me off reading again for another 6 months. So here we're in May, and I took Pet Sematary, brought it up to the counter, and she said, I believe we have quite enough books in our juvenile section for you to choose from. And I said, well, that's great. Thank you for the knowledge. I was there. This is what I want. I'm not going to get this. I'm not going to let you borrow this. I said, oh, really? Well, then, okay, goodbye. And I walked out, and it took me up until that August, and I just happened to come across an interview with Stephen King the night before my 13th birthday. They had him on Primetime Live on ABC. I watched the interview, and I said, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to the mall, and I'm going to go to Walden Books to get some Star Wars Omnibus book that I saw. This was 1990, and they still had the 10th anniversary collection of the 3 novelizations. I said, maybe I'll get a Stephen King book, and I ended up by grabbing The Shining because Batman had come out the year before, and I thought I was a big Jack Nicholson fan because I'd seen him as the Joker. Hadn't seen anything else of his, and I figured, well,
we're gonna take a break here for the news.
No sweat.
When we come back, we'll talk more about this with our guest Bill Gauthier. We'll talk more about horror writing, horror in general, and coming up, we have a story about a child that was killed during an exorcism this past week. So we'll talk about that and more when we come back on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 1420, WBSM.
ABC News. I'm Chuck Severson. As military and intelligence officials next try to get a solid damage assessment from U.S. and British missile attacks on Libya's air defenses, that nation's longtime dictator has spoken, described by former FBI counterterrorism expert Jack Clunan.
He's vengeful, vindictive, and he is a proven killer.
On Libyan TV through a translator, Muammar Gaddafi says he'll defend his country from what he called crusader aggression.
Now we should arm all the masses, open the arms depots to defend Libya, its unity and sovereignty and pride.
ABC's David Muir.
The Libyan intelligence community has for years been programmed to pinpoint anti-Gaddafi people all over the world and wait for Gaddafi's orders if they come. The question from the intelligence community is, where will their allegiance fall as they begin to watch this vice tighten around Gaddafi?
Though President Obama says there'll be no U.S. ground forces in Libya, what led to today's airstrikes? ABC's Jake Tapper at the White House.
One, he got intelligence from the front indicating that Gaddafi's forces were not retreating. They were going to go and show no mercy, as Gaddafi put it, on the citizens of Benghazi. And he said, what we're doing, the diplomatic efforts, are not working. Then two, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told him that Arab countries were willing to step up and provide a military role.
Pentagon officials say today's missile attacks was the first phase of a multi-phase operation. As crews work to stabilize the damaged nuclear reactors in northeast Japan, radiation exceeding government-allowed levels has been detected in spinach and milk from farms near the nuke plants. ABC's David Wright in Osaka.
The drinking water now has small quantities of radioactive iodine. Officials insist the levels are low enough that people would only be at risk if they consumed those products over a lifetime, but that's not so comforting. Not that grocery store shoppers here can afford to be choosy when so many shelves are empty.
New numbers, 7,700 dead, more than 11,000 missing. You're listening to ABC News.
It's deer season, and the deals are huge. Save big right now on all John Deere compact tractors, utility tractors, and hay tools. Get implement bonuses, cash back, or 0% financing. And this deer season, your trade has never been worth more. Offer ends May 2nd, 2011, subject to approved credit on John Deere Financial Installment Plan. Restrictions apply. See dealer for details.
Get these great John Deere deals and more at your local dealer. To find your nearest participating dealer, go to myjohndeeredealer.com.
Adventurous Americans. Maybe you own a motorcycle, a boat, an RV, a PWC, or an ATV. Well, FYI, Geico could save you money on insuring those vehicles. And here's how easy it is. You call Geico and speak with a specialized agent about all the vehicles you own. The agent crunches the numbers. And if you're like thousands of others, your rate is less than what you pay now. And where I come from, paying less means saving money. Call Geico today for a free rate quote. Geico. Saving people money on more than just car insurance.
Word from Tokyo's electric company that it plans to ease power shortages by restarting a gas-fired conventional power plant that was shut down after the earthquake and tsunami more than a week ago. Sting operations have been set up in New York for tour buses a week after the bus accident on a highway in New York City that killed 15 people. A state official familiar with the investigation says a single checkpoint resulted in 14 out of 14 buses ordered off the road. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered the sting. 10 major vehicle issues were found, plus 40 minor infractions. The biggest full moon in nearly 2 decades is up there.
It's kind of like the scene from the movie Bruce Almighty when Jim Carrey throws an imaginary rope around the moon and pulls it closer. Some sky watchers are calling it a supermoon. Tonight's moon will be closer to Earth during its elliptical orbit than it's been in 18 years. NASA astronomer Dave Williams said it's going to be big and really bright. Even though some believe a supermoon can lead to extreme weather events, scientists emphasize there is no evidence of a connection between the moon's position and extreme weather or natural disasters like Japan's earthquake here on Earth. Todd Ant, ABC News.
Baseball home run king Barry Bonds heads to trial Monday in San Francisco for his 2003 testimony to a federal grand jury that he never knowingly took performance-enhancing drugs. Bonds is charged with perjury. He denies the allegations. If convicted, Bonds could face 15 to 21 months in prison. This is ABC News.
Is it time for a new roof? Get your roofing job done right. Call Sears Roofing right now for a free in-home estimate. That's Sears Roofing. Not available in all areas. Installation provided by Sears authorized licensed contractors. License information available upon request. Call Sears Roofing right now. 1-888-990-2233. That's 1-888-990-2233. 1-888-990-2233. Sears.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
In the beloved fairy tale classic, Beauty and the Beast, Belle is imprisoned in the castle of a mysterious beast. But with the assistance of the castle's enchanted staff, the two become unlikely friends, discover that true beauty is found within, and they live happily ever after.
Today, our happily ever afters are being threatened by the fact that nearly 1 in 3 children in America are overweight or obese. Now more than ever, it's time to make good nutrition and physical activity part of your family's daily lifestyle. Do things like eat dinner together, add fruits and veggies to every meal, save treats for special occasions, and get up and play an hour each day. Be our guest to healthy living and visit letsmove.gov to learn more. That's letsmove.gov. This message has been brought to you by Let's Move, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Ad Council.
For America's wounded warriors, coming home can sometimes be a battle in itself. Making the transition back to civilian life or active duty with a traumatic injury can be the challenge of a lifetime. The USO provides every American a way to support our wounded warriors and their families through every phase of their medical treatment and rehabilitation. It's how all of us, as a community, can give something back to our heroes. It's how we can say thank you and assure them that their sacrifice is recognized and appreciated by every one of us. Join us. Visit USO.org to learn how you can make a difference in the lives of our wounded warriors and their families. The USO, until everyone comes home.
Welcome to today's lottery drawing. And today's winning numbers are not yours, not yours, and another number that's not yours. And the final number is not yours.
When it comes to having money, don't rely on luck. Brew your own coffee at home instead of buying that latte. Brown bag it to work instead of ordering it. Go to feedthepig.org for more free ideas on how to save. Feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
AM 1420, with live coverage of the New Bedford Half Marathon from start to finish on Sunday the 20th, New England's premier half marathon, with over 2,000 runners from all over the globe. Tune in at 10:45 for live start-to-finish coverage of the half marathon, sponsored by Hamill, Waxler, Allen & Collins, by Irving Oil, and by A&A Jewelers on AM 1420 WBSM.
For America's wounded warriors, sometimes coming home can be a battle in itself. Every one of them needs our support to meet the challenges they face every day. The USO provides Americans a way to offer that support to our wounded warriors and their families. Join us. Visit USO.org to learn how you can make a difference in their lives. The USO, until everyone comes home.
Let's say you're a dad and you want to take your son and daughter on the perfect camping trip. So you pack up the car with all your gear. We're all loaded up! And you get the right direction.
Arriving at destination.
And you set up camp right next to a creek.
I caught a fish!
And it all goes perfectly.
Best trip ever, Dad!
And you're the perfect dad. But even if it doesn't go that way and your gear ends up on the highway, and you get completely lost.
Where are you going?
And your campground is near a beehive. It can still be the perfect camping trip because kids don't always see things the way you see them.
Best trip ever, Dad!
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
It can't be.
We do have a system.
I'm sure I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky Southcoast is back.
It's boring. You're boring, everybody. Quit boring, everyone.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, content director Chris Balzano is on the phone, and with us in the studio is writer Bill Gauthier. And I apologize for that yawn. That's in no way indicative of present company. It's been a long day.
When I got the email asking if I wanted to be on tonight, I was in the middle of, I had just started watching the cinematic masterpiece Kevin Smith's Cop Out with Bruce Willis and Tracy Morgan, because there was nothing else on, and my night pretty much consisted of my wife being on the internet doing some research on a computer, me watching this really bad 80s ripoff kind of movie that was I was finding homage. I was finding quite delightful, I might add.
I loved
my
it.
wife
I thought it was great.
was hating it. She had sighed and grunted about 3 times. You're really watching this? And I'm saying yes. Yes, I am. And I laughed a couple of times and got the email. I was ready for bed. I don't even know if I was going to be able to last the rest of the movie. So I understand.
And it took me a little while getting into that movie to realize, oh, wait, I get it. It's an homage to all these movies. Because before that, I was like, what? This is just straight crap.
Well, there was a scene on the internet that I forgot. I think it was actually crack.com hit me to, where they're interrogating a little boy. And I saw the scene, and that's all I'm going to say. I don't think I can say it on radio. But look it up, I guess, Cop Out, little boy scene, I guess. I don't know. But that was the one that made me go, I'm putting this on Netflix. And I didn't have to. Apparently it's on HBO now, so I was ready to go into a coma watching that.
Introducing parkour to a whole new generation. All right, well, we're talking about a lot of different things, but we're talking about horror writing, and one of the things that we were talking about beforehand was, getting into it through Stephen King, and
Yes.
we were having a discussion about each of us kind of going and trying to check out that Stephen King, and it sounds like you were finally able to get your hands on a copy.
I got
of
my
those
hands
books.
on The Shining, and I was 3 chapters into it. I was reading about Jack Torrance in the Overlook basement, and I had one of the few sort of out-of-body experiences where I actually got up and looked at myself and went, you're riveted by this scene in a basement. You've never read an adult book before. You've tried, but they've all bored you. You're in the basement and you can't put it down. And I said, this is what I want to do. This is what you want to do. And I had a manual typewriter in a closet. I set it up on 2 milk crates that day, and with one finger started clacking away, and everyone thought I was nuts. I'm pretty sure my parents definitely thought I was nuts in high school. I know social life, I was too busy writing, and what are you doing, and that sort of thing. But 13 years later, I was in that anthology with Mr. King. So
Is it one of those, which is a very cool thing? But
it totally is.
Was it one of those things where you had these stories in you and you had to let them out, or were there times when you're staring at a blank page saying, I want to create something here and I just don't know where to go with it?
I've always had stories in me. Like I said before, the Star Wars action figures in general, were my lifesaver as a child. Although the neighborhood I lived in didn't have a lot of kids. There were maybe 5 kids my age, all told. One was about 4 years older, one a year older, and one a year younger. And I'm thinking the rest were fairly small. And the ones who were a year older and a year younger, they lived down the street from me. Their mother actually told my mother at one point, your son has an overactive imagination, and that's going to be bad for him someday. Well, both her sons ended up by being scientists. For a long time, I was working at bookstores, and now I'm a teacher. So maybe she wasn't too far off with that. I'm sure they're doing great things. But on the other hand, the imagination has
I
done
wouldn't
well.
be too sure. I mean, that's a
by me.
scientist too. So it's a very loose definition of the word these days.
I guess, but I would be, I would be running around the neighborhood playing either role playing, like I said, Batman or Luke Skywalker or whatever. I'd be with my action figures, and at first the action figures, whether it was Star Wars or G.I. Joe, were Star Wars or G.I. Joe. But at some point, relatively young, Han Solo and the Bespin fatigues became just my generic hero figure, and sometimes that Bespin outfit would be a suit and he'd be like a spy, or sometimes it'd be a cool jacket like Axel Foley would wear in Beverly Hills Cop, or sometimes he would be in a horror thing, and got to the point where I would actually start timing out my stories with my action figures and called them movies. And that just sort of led to the typewriter thing. I tell my students, because I'm in a position teaching where I'm actually teaching kids how to tell stories. I'm not an English teacher per se. I'm certified for English, but that's not what I do. And I'm constantly telling them, when I sit down to write my first draft, and I've said this to my wife and anyone who will listen, so I'll tell your audience, when I sit down for my first draft, it's me playing with my action figures. That's exactly what it is. I have action figures all around me, and not all around me. I don't have that many out and stuff. Most of them are put away and hidden so that I'm not locked up. But the good ones, the Freddy Krueger ones, and there's some Star Wars and some superheroes, they're out. And part of the reason why they're out is just that reminder that that's why you're doing this, Bill. You're not doing it to get famous. First off, you can't, because there's like 3 famous writers and we all know who they are, and that's and that's pretty much it. You're not doing it for that. It's cool to see your name on a book. I keep looking down at the book on the desk and thinking,
You mean Shadowed by Bill Gauthier.
who is that guy? And there's another novella out called Alice on the Shelf as well, and beautiful artwork, and I've looked at that several times, and that one means quite a bit to me. And it's always cool to see your name in print, but the fact of the matter is, the reason you do it, for me anyway, is just the stories are there. I was divorced about 5 years ago now, and during that time, some of the stories, they were there, but I couldn't get to them. And man, that was a tough period, probably one of the toughest periods of my life, besides the fact that my whole life was being turned upside down and everything. And the story started to come back, and eventually I met my wife, my current wife, and my one and only wife, Pamela. Say current, you make it sound like, well, until next Thursday.
Yeah.
When, Natalie Portman finally returns my call, or Julianne Moore, or whoever. But, no, when I met my wife, I was starting to go on the upswing, but it was really after getting together with her in 2007 that the stories really, I found my way back to the stories again. And man, what a relief. And now it's like, they're there. During the break, I was telling you about that one that I was thinking about someday possibly doing. I've got about 4 other ones in my head. They all seem to want to be the size of The Stand or It, or they won't be. They'll probably be 100 pages. But right now in my mind, I'm working on a manuscript right now. I'm editing a manuscript. The manuscript is about 750, 60 pages.
Wow.
I know that that's going to go down because it has to. But that was the first significant thing I wrote after I met my wife. I'd say Shadowed is probably the second. So, I was actually working on that when I met her, one of the drafts of that, but it stalled. So, that sort of thing but it's the stories. That's the thing that.
Well, you mentioned, sometimes wondering why it is that you do what you do, and needing that reminder.
Yeah.
Of why you do what you do. And I had, I put out my book, Ghost of the Southcoast.
Yeah.
Not to make this a show about me at all, but I'm just saying.
It should be. It's your show.
No. It's the audience's show. We're just the hosts. So we, I put the book out, and I did it kind of, as I was writing it, I'm like, why am I doing this again? And I was doing it kind of because somebody had to tell the story of the paranormal in this area.
Exactly.
And I figured I'd be in the best spot to do it.
And there's a
I'm a
market
writer,
for it.
and I should do it. And it wasn't until I illegally put it into ebook form and put it on my Nook, which it actually just found out this week, folks. There will be an ebook version coming out officially from the History Press in the next few weeks. So, but anyway, I put it on the Nook, and I'm just to see what it would look like in that
Yeah,
form, because
yeah,
I hadn't bought any books yet. It was the only PDF file I had to do it with.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there looking at it, and my son picks it up. He's only 6 years old, and he's just beginning to love reading.
Mhm.
And he picks it up and he starts reading it,
Yeah.
and he's reading the chapter on Wareham, and he's actually getting into it and retaining. I was like, all right, that's why.
I need to get a copy of this book.
it's not that. It's not.
No. I'm saying I'm interested.
It's not that good of a feeling to know
Email
that
me the link.
when you wrote something to somebody, when you wrote something and you realize that a 6-year-old is reading it and comprehending it, you're like, oh well,
Yeah,
maybe it's
yeah.
not the masterpiece I thought it was, but it's still good though to see, to make that connection, and I mean, he's read 2 giant Pokemon Pokédex books cover to cover, and I was impressed by that ability, but it wasn't until I saw him reading my words that I realized that. So I think that if you can do that, if you can, make somebody's light turn on, and I'm sure with the stories that you write, you have that ability to make people's light turn on, except in regards to your books, they're turning on the light because they're getting scared.
Well, whatever way works. Whatever way
Well,
works.
what are some of the themes that you find that you consistent? I mean, do you try to go back to a lot of the same themes in your writing, or do you find that each one takes you in a different direction?
One of the things, because I am the nerd that I am, I and become obsessive about not just if I find a writer that I like or a musician or whatever. I've been on a Bruce Springsteen kick for 5 years. My wife thinks she's ready to jump out the window, but it's because the music has touched me in a way that I become the fact where I get to the point where I'm like a scholar. I want to learn everything about it. Stephen King was like that. During the break, we were talking briefly. I mentioned Harlan Ellison. I find that when I'm looking at their books and their work, you can find these fluctuations. I've tried not to do that with mine too much because I don't want to be too self-aware of when I sit down. But I'm egotistical enough to have done that on a few occasions. And I guess maybe if you're self-aware, it's a good thing sometimes. As long as when you're at that computer, typewriter, pad with pen, you're not aware of it. I have noticed that there was a while where my collection, I have a collection of short stories that came out in 2007 called Catalysts, and I didn't realize it at the time because the collection is a bunch of stories that were written over just about, I'd say, an 8-year period from 1999 when Greg Gaffune published my first short story in his old magazine, Burning Sky, right up till post Borderlands. There's a great story in it called Drawn In, which is about a homeless man who hasn't seen his daughter in 20 years, and he had been kicked out of the marriage because he was an alcoholic and all the stuff, and he'd become drunk, and he starts having these dreams, these weird dreams of being on this mountaintop on this mattress, and he can't figure out why. When in one of the dreams, this giant bird takes him, brings him down to this little girl. He realizes this is his daughter. He sees his daughter, and during their conversation, becomes an adult. And she essentially says, I found this magic pencil kind of thing, and I drew this picture. I knew you'd recognize the mountain because I drew it when I was a little girl, and this and that. And I would like to see you. I saw you the other day. I saw you a couple of weeks ago, walking around the city, and I want to get back together. And he wakes up, and the bushes start to move a little bit where he's under the bridge, and then the story ends. And I realized at that point that story was my coming to terms with leaving the marriage that I had been in at the time. Going back from there, I realized that most of the stories in that collection were about people being alone or having to be alone or making the choice to be alone or feeling like an outsider at some point. And I started to look at the other things that I had written, all the thousands and thousands, something like 10 books that I had written that I had never published. I only tried to publish 5 of them because I wrote my first book at 16. This really, really terrible 200-something page werewolf vampire mishmash, terrible. First line of it is, Ksh! So it's bad. If that's your first line,
but it ended up going on to become a successful series known as Twilight.
Well,
just you missed the boat on it.
Actually, no, it was more adult than Twilight.
Oh, okay.
It was scary. There was no sparkling vampires in that. I shouldn't say that. My daughter is was a Twilight fan. God help her.
Those aren't vampires. Those are glampires.
Oh, is that what the term is? I wasn't.
Well, they're all sparkly.
Yeah. No, I lost it. I lost my train of thought. No, that's fine.
Well,
I was babbling. I was doing what I do.
It sounds though like as much as you're talking about the reflection of your own life and the themes in your books,
the themes.
It seems like when you're talking about these characters, do you feel like you have a responsibility to tell their stories, or do you use them more just as tools to tell your story?
A little of both. A little of both. I tend to have a concept before I start writing, but I start with the concept. I think, wouldn't this be cool? However, I won't do anything until I have at least one or two characters, like main characters, that I feel like I know something about. Sometimes it's nothing more than I'm not one of those people. I don't do all kinds of notes pre-writing kind of stuff. I know I've heard of some writers who do that sort of thing. I don't plot. I don't do anything like that. I know essentially the concept, and I know the main character, and I usually don't start unless I have a first line, preferably a first paragraph, and then I go from there. Sometimes it's the right first paragraph. Sometimes I find out it's the wrong first paragraph, but it's the thing that gets me going, and then I learn about the characters as the reader would often, which is why it's so important for me. I just read something that a writer posted on our website, advice to writers in this new age of the digital book and stuff. And one of her pieces of advice was, don't rewrite, because if you rewrite, you're more concerned with style, and nobody cares about style. They want the true essence of you. Well, if I published the true essence of me, it would go right into the trash can. It's not that interesting. Sometimes for me, I have to overwrite before I actually get to what the real meaning of the story is, and then I can always take that stuff and either use it later in the book, or as long as I know that it's there, it might not be relevant to everything else. But
it's funny because I remember when I was younger, when it's drilled into you, draft. When I was in like 5th or 6th grade, I had a teacher who was adamant about writing 3 drafts before you had your final.
Yes.
Always have 3 drafts and then your final draft. And I said, I can't do that. I don't write that way. Everything that I want to say comes out in the first draft. And if I don't like what happens as I'm writing it, that's what my eraser is for.
Yeah.
And, I ended up getting into a big argument with the teacher about it. And finally she said, listen, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a writer. Well, you're never going to be a writer if you don't write drafts. There's no job involved with writing where you could ever just write one draft and have that be it. And I actually have that job today. I work at a newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, and Ray Bradbury never writes drafts,
Mm-hmm.
and that woman might be able to do that one draft. I know for me personally, and for a lot of people, that's not the way to do it. And I think that when you're young and starting out, especially with something like this, the school stuff is all BS. And I like I said, I'm certified to teach English, and the kids say, well, my English teacher told me to do this. And I said, your English teacher told you to do that because they have to deal with 40 students. 25 of them can barely read, never mind form a sentence. They're telling you to do the 5 sentences and 5 paragraphs, or 5 sentences and 3 paragraphs, I forget what it is, because they know that if they let you do it, you might turn in a good essay. But they know if they let that one do it, the one sitting behind you, they're going to get 1 sentence, and it's not even going to be well written. So that's why they do that. I know Bradbury and Ellison, and they can write off 1 draft, but they also came from a time where the pulps were still, you got paid that penny a word. Well, you still paid a penny a word in some places now, but
I'd love to get that rate.
I mean, I guess getting paid. I'm paid more. I'm paid less often than I would like to be. So I'm not going to poo-poo the penny a word. If I can get that, I'll get that. The trouble for me is when they say, "Oh, well, we'll only give you a contributor's copy." I'm at the point now in my career where, by the way, my career is just about non-existent. I'm at the point in my career now where I'm not even going to accept just that. Give me $1. If I can go out and do something with that dollar, I don't know what you can do with $1 now, but do something with that dollar, then I'm happy. Just give me work.
Think G-string.
Is
Hey
there,
now.
but there must be, with this rise in the interest in the paranormal,
Mhm.
with the new way of telling horror through films with movies like Paranormal Activity, which, like it or love it, it's a different approach.
Yeah.
With all these new ways of doing things, and with the kind of spirituality that America seems to have these days, there must be a way to work horror into the culture in a different way than we've seen it in the past. I mean, I think now we're starting to see a lot more of the psychological bend to things, because when the world is bad, there's enough to be afraid of. You don't really need slasher flicks like we had before. Do you see any new trends coming up in horror writing or in horror films or in any way in that genre?
I can't say that I personally do, only because I'm probably not as well read right now as I would like to be in those things. I'm actually rereading Stephen King's It, so I'm stuck in the 80s and the 50s.
Oh man.
Could be
read
worse
that
things.
every day if I could.
I haven't read it since I was 16, and things have been busy. And I said I need Stephen King is my pair of slippers when I want to just relax. It's slippers with teeth, but they're slippers. And I said I came home from work. I just started a class that I have to take to keep my day job, and I came home that night at 9 o'clock, having come from Bridgewater, and I said I need something that's gonna relax me, and that's when I grabbed it off the shelf. I said, I haven't read this since I was 16. Let me do that. As far as the new things, I don't know. It's funny because there have been the few reviews that have come out of Shadowed and of Alice on the Shelf, and even my collection of short stories a couple of years back, they kept saying, innovative and going new places and this and that. And Tom Montioloni, who did the introduction to Catalyst, said, something to the effect of, I love the quote because it sounded so cool, and I thought, I want to read this guy, and I realized it's me and it can't be right. Something about he writes with an attitude that's he writes with an attitude that borders on cocky or something, and I went, that's awesome. How the heck do I do that? Because to me, I'm sitting there playing with my stupid action figures. Mm-hmm. Even the horror movies that are coming out lately, I don't know where they're heading. I don't know what can be new now, because there is so much new stuff happening in the world in terms of like technology. I suppose that a lot of horror and stuff can go techno-wise.
I'm surprised that it hasn't.
We call it sci-fi.
Well, that's the thing, it would.
But I mean, if you look at a movie like I mentioned earlier, Deadly Friend, and if you look at some of those other movies, they had scanners, the Lawnmower Man.
I was just gonna say, I mean, even just Christine, which is just a car coming to life, or trucks, or Maximum Overdrive, depending on what version you're going by. I would imagine that there'll be something like that. I think that one of the reasons why it's so hard to pinpoint now, and this is the case with everything, is that it's the world is so different than it was. We have so many means of information and so many means to get information, so many means to get entertainment, where even when we were growing up, we were just starting to get cable. I mean, I remember when New Bedford got cable, we had, oh, look at this, we've got 30 channels, and they don't have snow in them. Ooh, and sometimes they'll show boobies, something like that. Yeah, that sort of thing. That's why I was up late, because I was excited. and
horror movies always have the best boobies.
Well, exactly, absolutely. Blood and boobies. I mean, come on now. You can't, you can't get that for $1. But I feel like now what happens is, you're going to have the wave of the future that's going to be the glampires, unfortunately. You're going to also get whatever is the result of those. You're going to get people who are more traditionalists, the same. It's funny. I go and I said, I read some reviews that said, Shadowed, someone wrote somewhere on some forum that Shadowed is so good and it's original and everything else, and then on some other forum someone wrote, nah, it was okay, and I guess where it was going. Now I'm probably adding that tone to it, but it's funny. I was this evening I was reading the Rolling Stone article about an interview with Howard Stern, and he was talking about how all these great things have happened to him. And he's even said this week, talking about Twitter. He'll have 100 people tell him how great the show is and everything, but that one person who says something negative, and that's what he focuses on. And that was sort of that happened to me today. I saw that one little, and it wasn't really even negative. It was just that little bit of, oh, I got to stop doing this Google thing and just get to work.
But it's that one person that'll be in the back of your mind next time, and then you'll say, "I'll show you."
Well, that's my whole writing career is the first part of it is the play, the action figures. The second part of it is me saying, "I'll show you" to everybody in my life who has ever said anything negative about me or has put me down. I was, the last one chosen in school for sports games. I didn't even realize this at one point, but just recently I was to do some, just recently, I guess it was the beginning of the school year because we were going school shopping with my daughter, and I had just mentioned offhand, oh yeah, something, I should be able to talk my way out of fights, good talker. And I said, well, actually, I've only talked my way out of one fight, and this is when it was. And then all of a sudden, 2 hours later, I had told my wife and my daughter all these stories about me getting chased home from Brooklyn Park by strangers, kids I didn't know, all these things happening. I realized that I had been bullied and had forgotten, kind of knew about it, but kind of forgotten, and all these other things. And, those, going back to the question about the stuff that pops up in the stories, that stuff pops up in the stories. And for a long time, I wasn't even really aware of it.
Why, yeah.
Shadowed has some bullies in it. I just finished another novella that actually has a couple of characters that are in Shadowed. It's not a sequel by any means. As a matter of fact, I already had the story in mind before I went to work on this draft, and I realized I can use those two people in this story, and maybe that will help leverage a sale later if this thing comes to fruition. So I have that one. That's got bullying as a major aspect of it.
Well, we had a call, but it looks like it dropped off. But if you want to call in and join in, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Those are the numbers. You can also jump into the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. And you can also email us, spookycrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. Chris, do you have any questions for Bill before we go into the next break?
No, I'm just devastated that that Dave just said he got my book at BJ's this week.
Really?
I'm not sure whether he's being serious about that, but that's blowing my mind away.
I actually have to. I have a picture I have to send to Belanger of Weird Massachusetts on the discount bin at Stop and Shop.
Well, Ghostly Adventures actually was re-released as a discount book. So how about that when your book is actually designed to be discounted? And then when I went into Barnes & Noble, it was on discount for the discount.
Well, I've been doing a lot of shopping at the Dollar Tree lately, Chris, and I have yet to see any of ours there. So, we're doing good. But there is a book that I'm going to buy for you there, if I remember to buy it next time I'm there. It's a book all about the films of John Hughes.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
we just threw Buffy and John Hughes in one Spooky South Coast episode.
We do.
Way too focused right now.
Off the air, we were talking Dark Tower and Lost. So, wish you were here, buddy. Wish you were here.
So do I, my friend. Trust me.
Why don't we take a break then, and when we come back, we'll talk about this case that happened in Nantucket this week where a child was killed during an exorcism. I know it's kind of a downer to go from talking about your work to talking about a child being killed, but this is definitely something that's in the news, so we're going to talk about that. We'll get Chris's take as a chronicler of all the things that go on in this area as well, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Hello there. Do you recognize my voice? That's right. I'm a professional announcer. Companies all over the world hire me to make their offers sound more compelling, irresistible. I persuade people just like you to buy shoes, cars, dial 1-800 numbers, and act now while supplies last. It's useless to resist. I'm a trained professional. My voice has power. I get paid to talk, and I can talk about anything to anybody, except when it comes to talking to my parents about aging. No matter what I try, I can't seem to talk about the aging issue. I want to ask them what they want, what their plans are, but instead I end up telling them about my latest gig. Talking to my parents about their care as they get older should be easy for a professional like me, but it's not.
No matter who you are, it's not easy talking about aging. For help getting started, go to voa.org/talk. A message from Volunteers of America.
AM 1420, WBSM, where every Friday morning, the Pete Braley Show buys you dinner at the Metapoisa Chowder House. To win, simply become a WBSM Facebook fan. It's easy. Just log on to WBSM.com and enter the keyword Facebook. Every Friday morning at 8:20, Pete and Neil read the name of a Facebook fan. When you hear yours, call back and win. Become a WBSM Facebook fan and win with the Metapoisa Chowder House and AM 1420 WBSM.
Before his injury, John Bennett was a career soldier. While serving in Iraq, he was shot by a sniper.
Stepped out, turned back towards the Humvee, and as soon as I did, I got hit. It shattered 2 vertebrae and fractured another one. I ended up losing my right kidney, my spleen, my colon, and half my pancreas.
John's wife, Dina.
Paralyzed Veterans of America got us our benefits.
Senior National Service Officer Michael Killen.
I helped them fill out the forms. I hand carried the forms over to the VA and walked them through the system.
You're just trying to survive, and they help you along the way.
It's very nice to see when your work pays off and you're very successful in it, because you can see the change in that veteran.
Him starting a taxidermy business is accomplishing something every day.
I'm glad to be back to work.
To learn more about Paralyzed Veterans of America, visit pva.org, a public service of Paralyzed Veterans of America.
AM 1420, WBSM. Available anywhere and anytime at WBSM.com. Just one click gives you local news and weather, national and world news, business and entertainment news, and of course, sports. WBSM.com has the Pete Braley and Ken Pittman blogs, chances to save with half-price hookup and iBid, and even ways to win. One click does it all from anywhere at any time. WBSM.com.
I feel like it's all on my shoulders. How am I going to take care of my parents if they develop an eye disease like glaucoma? Glaucoma is the leading cause of blindness in African Americans and Hispanics in the United States. And what about my kids? Will they inherit it? Not to mention my risk factor. I'm really concerned and I need some answers.
Call 1-800-437-2423 or go to ahaf.org for answers, including a free brochure on glaucoma.
My name is Tom Thornton.
And my name is Cindy Thornton. We're retired, and this is how we live United.
We decided to volunteer with United Way at our community free health clinic.
United Way is how we contribute, because we know our time and money are going to the right places.
Judging by the thank yous we get at the clinic, I'd say we're doing the right thing with our retirement, too. We're Tom and Cindy Thornton. We volunteer at our community free health clinic. We don't just wear the shirt.
We live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
This heavyweight bout is about to begin. The challenger wears white trunks with a blue stripe, and the champ is wearing, looks like an examination gown from the doctor's office. And from the back, we can... Ooh, that's not pretty. Champ, what's with the crazy getup?
I've got to take care of my family.
Yeah, so?
Well, when you love your family, you got to go in and get those important medical screenings. A lot of potentially deadly diseases can be treated if you catch them in time.
So you wear the examination gown because...
Because I'm a real man. Real men take care of their families and get those tests. Real men wear gowns.
Okay, champ, good luck. Here we go. The champ's not wasting any time. Oh, it's over. This fight is over. Champ, you barely broke a sweat. Any words for your fans out there?
Remember, go to ahrq.gov for a list of the tests they need to get and when to get them.
What was that web address again?
ahrq.gov. And remember, real men wear gowns.
Go to ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, AHRQ, and the Ad Council.
What if your brother
or your husband? What if your son came back from the service with a spinal cord injury?
When they volunteer to serve, we expect our country to be there for them if they are injured.
For more than 60 years, Paralyzed Veterans of America has been fighting to ensure that we receive all of the benefits that we've earned.
Thank you, Paralyzed Veterans, for helping my husband.
My son.
for helping my brother.
You too can help. Visit pva.org, a public service of Paralyzed Veterans of America.
Welcome to today's lottery drawing. And today's winning numbers are not yours, not yours, and another number that's not yours. And the final number is not yours.
When it comes to having money, don't rely on luck. Brew your own coffee at home instead of buying that latte. Brown bag it to work instead of ordering it. Go to feedthepig.org for more free ideas on how to save. Feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Hear all the action from the Garden and from on the road. Bruins Hockey, presented by Southern Mass Credit Union, Paul and Dixon Insurance, and by Gary's Best Hot Dog on AM 1420 WBSM. WBSM presents The Garden Guys, Sunday morning at 7. What to plant and when to plant it. Flowers, vegetable gardens, plants, and your lawn. Help for all your outdoor needs. The Garden Guys, Sunday mornings from 7 till 9 on AM 1420 WBSM.
You're a coward. You got nothing to be afraid of. Step aside, I'll show you.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky South Coast is back.
Oh my! Oh, woe is me!
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin, Matt Costa, science advisor, Matt Moniz, content director Christopher Balzano, and our guest tonight, writer Bill Gauthier. Bill, you have a website that you can give out to everybody?
www.billgauthier.com.
There you go. It's the easiest way to do it.
Facebook and Twitter and everything else. So.
And it's all linked up right on SpookySouthCoast.com as well.
Cool.
And our guests that that were going to join us, Manny and Kristen from Bridgewater Triangle Research, they're going to come on with us April 2nd. So that'll be the new date for that show. And we've got all kinds of great stuff coming up in the coming weeks, so you don't want to miss that. Next week, we're going to be talking with the folks from the South Coast Toy and Comic Show, which is coming up next Sunday at the Seaport Inn and Marina here in Fairhaven. Again, it's only $6 to get in. You're going to get a chance to meet Larry Thomas, the soup Nazi from Seinfeld, Gremlina, former gorgeous lady of wrestling, and a paranormal investigator, actually. So we're gonna talk to her. We're going to talk to her about some of that stuff. Somebody from Baywatch, I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. I'm not allowed to remember Baywatch. My wife doesn't like it. And the part that I'm the most excited for, aside from all the great comic book writers and artists that they're going to have there.
The Cars?
As well as our friends Penny Dreadful and Guru, they'll be there too. Yes, absolutely. They're going to have the General Lee. They're going to have the original Batmobile.
Holy mackerel.
And they're going to have the original Bat Cycle. And you're going to get your chance to sit in these vehicles, have your picture taken. So
you hear that, Pamela? We're going.
There you go. Next Saturday, you can go to southcoasttoyandcomicshow.com or go to Facebook and look up South Coast Toy and Comic Show to get all the information. And yes, Dave, the female wrestler, Gremlina, yes, is going to be there. So you got to come down. We got to get you down this area somehow. And if the General Lee and Gremlina doesn't do it, I don't know what will. So that's coming up next Sunday, and we'll have them on Saturday night as part of that show, as well as others as well. So I can't remember who the guest is, Chris. I apologize. Can you fill us in? Oh, wait. All right, Chris.
Writer guy.
What?
My computer's kind of on the fringe right now. I'm trying to pull it up. It's the gentleman who wrote the UFO Hunter Guide.
Okay. Sorry, it's been a long day, and I'm not fully prepared.
And neither am I, especially with my computer. So
I apologize. I apologize for your computer too.
Oh, no problem.
All right, well,
if I got paid for this gig, we wouldn't have this. So.
as soon as we get paid, Chris, we'll be sure to pay you.
What? They're not paying anyone?
No, we do all of us out of the
sorry.
love of our hearts. That's why pennies for the word would be great for us. All right. Well, on a serious note, though, let's get into the discussion here about this case. I'm going to read the story here from the Cape Cod Times. The woman accused of killing her 3-year-old daughter earlier this week believed God had instructed her to stick a rose in the young girl's throat to ward off the devil, according to documents filed in Nantucket District Court. Dora Alicia Tejada Pleitez, 26, was held without bail pending a mental competency hearing following her arraignment Tuesday on a murder charge. She was taken off the island Tuesday for the evaluation and is scheduled to appear in Nantucket District Court on Monday for a pretrial hearing. The police were called to the family's home at about 12:40 p.m. Monday. Officers found her daughter, Nicole Garcia, lying on the table inside the home and attempted to resuscitate her until the paramedics arrived. She was taken to the hospital where she was pronounced dead at 1:18 p.m. During an interview shortly after Garcia's death, Pleitez, who was originally from El Salvador, began singing and praying, telling investigators through a Spanish interpreter that the Holy Spirit could speak through her. Pleitez told the police that she had been seated on a couch in the living room of the Pine Tree Road home earlier in the day with her daughter and son. She described a mundane scene, trying to get nail clippers away from her son and covering her daughter with a blanket after she complained of being cold. She asked her sister-in-law, who was in the kitchen, to bring candy for her son. She then went to sleep at one point and fell to the floor with her daughter. The next thing she remembered was waking up with people in the home asking her whether anyone had hurt her daughter, according to what she told the police. She said she had been away on a religious retreat for the past several days and could not say whether her daughter had recently hurt herself. Pleitez's story appears to have unraveled as the police interviewed other family members. Her sister-in-law told investigators that she repeatedly called her into the living room to join her in prayer. She said she became uncomfortable in the situation, so she went outside and called her husband. She waited outside for about 20 minutes until her husband arrived. On his way to the home, she asked him to pray on the phone with her. During the telephone conversation, Pleitez told her brother that their dead sister, Maria Elena, was in the room with her. Tejada said while on the phone, Pleitez told him that from now on they would be calling Nicole Maria Elena. This is getting really bizarre. Pleitez had previously told her brother that God had given her the ability to see people that had died. When Tejada arrived at her home, his sister was holding Nicole and would not let him take her away. She said she thought Nicole's face looked like Maria Elena's, the police wrote. When Tejada reached out and touched the girl's leg, he realized she was dead. When Pleitez returned to the police station later in the night, she was left alone in an interview room where she placed her arms out in a cross-like manner and stood there for several moments. She agreed to speak with investigators at first, but then changed her mind. Before she left, an investigator observed a mark on her hand with a piece of skin hanging off, and she was taken to the hospital for attention. During her treatment, she stuck a rose. She said she stuck a rose on her daughter's throat because God told her to. She put the rose on her daughter's throat because demons were inside the girl, according to the translation. Pink roses and rose petals were found on the floor of the home's living room, according to the police. They believe her son might have also been in danger. She thought about fighting the demons out of both her children, and at that point had one child in each arm. So, I mean, just the story just keeps getting more and more bizarre as it goes along. And what's strange about this, Chris, and I know that you chronicle a lot of these type stories, especially, the Bridgewater Triangle stories that we hear so often, but what's strange about this is it's bringing in these beliefs of somebody who is obviously very religious, and there might have been something else that was wrong with the child that she is misinterpreting as some sort of possession.
Yeah, and that's the way it goes. When I first started doing the News for Ghost Village, I remember the first time one of these stories came up, and I posted it immediately. I thought it was, oh my word, this is big news. This is gonna change things. People are gonna, and what I began to find out is there's 2 or 3 of these types of stories a week. And almost all of them involve people who are highly religious and who turn to those religious beliefs to cure what may or may not be, an exorcism, but which seems, from everyone who's involved, who's looking at it rationally, some kind of mental health disorder, whether it be on the part of the person who does the exorcism or the person who is being exorcised. And it's a real, you think that we've evolved past this to a point where, these kinds of services are available to people, and yet it's that religious belief that keeps getting distorted into thinking that this is a logical way to go. And turning to your faith for problems is completely okay and it should be encouraged. But when you get to the point where you're ignoring what's in front of you, that's an issue. And these are not, these are not people whose ideas fall into the realm of, well, we don't believe in modern medicine. It's, they're taking antibiotics and doing the exorcism. So it's this really weird, and almost all the cases, this one being kind of somewhat of an exception, there's a hopelessness there. There's a we can't do anything more until here's what we've turned to. And in a lot of cases, there could have been more done.
But in some cases, it's the first thing they turn to.
Well,
right. I mean, this seems like a clear-cut case of someone who has mental health issues.
What I'm worried about is somebody else pulling a copycat type thing, because things like this cause other people to have the same idea, even though they may be mentally ill as well. It gives them another impetus to copy.
I read in the paper that sticking a rose in someone's throat will cure them of possession.
I mean, the form may change, Matt, but the copycat effect is out there. Like I said, I get 2 or 3 stories, unique stories, which means I get 15 or 16, stories that are follow-ups or from a different angle or from a different paper. I mean, 2 or 3 cases a week where this happens across this country and beyond. So, I mean, it already is a very stuck thing in our consciousness that these exorcisms can help.
What's interesting is in the last few years in Nantucket, they also had a rash of teen suicides as well. So it seems like, we talk about how sometimes this stuff kind of takes on a mass hysteria mentality, a group mentality almost. So you got to kind of be concerned about it in that light as well.
Yeah, and it's and of course, what we don't hear of are the thousands of cases, small or large, of people who go through exorcisms that are successful. When I say exorcisms that are successful, I'm talking about people who have a strong religious belief, who are in a religious culture that believes that exorcism can be a weekly or daily thing, and who receive, the mental health help that they need because there's a smaller case. Almost all these cases seem to involve once you get the smaller children involved.
Is there in these types of cases, is there usually the situation where it is kind of somebody acting on their own like this, where they have these strange ideas about an exorcism, and there's no church involved, no guidance involved anywhere, and it's kind of just their own interpretation of what to do? Is that, it seems like most of these ones that go wrong, that's what happens.
Nope. I would know. From what I've seen, there are as many cases, if not more cases, where there is an authority figure who's conducting the exorcism.
Really?
And of course, from that perspective, and these people are often quoted as saying, well, the battle was lost. It's not that we were doing the wrong thing. We just lost the battle. Or, and this is the unfortunate thing, oftentimes it gets twisted into the person's faith was not strong enough to bring the child through.
And now, unfortunately, this woman is going to have to go through, through a trial, and I'm sure this is going to be a very sensationalized trial, and she's only going to feel like, she's going to feel more and more like she did the right thing.
Now, are they going to be blaming all of the stuff in the paranormal society that's been out in the public for helping to feed her?
I think not. Maybe not necessarily in this case. And I don't know if you agree with this, Chris. We only got about 2 minutes left, but it seems like this is a case where the religious aspect of it is so great. I don't think it's going to be lumped in with the paranormal community.
What usually happens is much more in the paranormal community. It's linked to a rise of exorcism-themed movies, and I'm sure someone else, whether it's Mr. Coleman or someone else, can do a comparison of when these movies are released and whether the rate goes up or down. But more often than not, these cases are often connected to a current movie that is out about exorcism and putting the blame more on that than on, say, paranormal investigators or ghost hunters or something like that.
Well, you know how the media tends to lump things together.
Right. Gosh darn those media people.
Us included.
Yeah.
Well, that about does it for tonight's show. Chris, thank you for helping us put this together on short notice.
Hey, thank you, Bill, for being able to come in. That was amazing.
No problem, Chris.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I was going to say, once again, BillGauthier.com is the website. You can get Shadowed. You can get Alice on the Shelf. What's some of the other titles that you have in mind? Any cool titles that are kind of sticking out in your mind?
Right now I've become a huge fan of Joe Hill, Stephen King's Spawn, and it proves that some of these things can go right through the genetic pool. He's amazing, and right now, go back to some of the classics. Harlan Ellison is always good.
I got a title for your next book. Moniz, the Brain That Wouldn't Die. All right, so that'll do it for this week's show. So until next week, for Chris Balzano, from Matt Costa, from Matt Moniz, I'm Tim Weisberg. We want you all to stay spooktacular.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 14.